set this our countdown theme music.
There should be some theme music, actually. That's a good idea.
Hello, welcome on behalf of the Global Compassion Coalition. I'm Mia Frank, Chair of the Economy Working Group of the Global Compassion Coalition, and I have great pleasure to welcome Dr. Robert Cramond and Dr. Lee Wainwright with us tonight to discuss social entrepreneurship. So just for context, we would like to discuss how social entrepreneurship is different than what we currently have as the dominant model. How can we go beyond the traditional financial metrics to include personal growth, identity reconstruction, social reintegration as objectives, and success metrics? And this resonates very much with the mission of the Economy Working Group of the Global Compassion Coalition, where we are working to create pathways for people to take action to meet their own needs and other needs, and realize their potential and thrive. So today we will explore together what will it take to serve the underserved and to go beyond that, empower them to meet their own needs and others' needs, and put their talents to use through social entrepreneurship. We will leave some time for audience questions at the end, so please feel free to submit through the Q&A. And now I'd like to introduce our guests. So the social entrepreneurship requires developing a dense, resilient social enterprise ecosystem with multi-stakeholder cooperation. So it's a very multifaceted, complex challenge, but we will have focus areas that are determined by the areas of specialty and work of our two guests today. Robert Cramond focuses on the role of universities and business schools in furthering entrepreneurship as a tool for social regeneration. And Lee Wainwright studies how gaining access to entrepreneurship as a mindset or as an economic activity can impact marginalized populations and empower them to overcome the complex multi-causal challenges they face. So even though there are multiple ingredients necessary to put in place to enable social enterprise and ideas from anyone from the audience to spark social change, we will focus on the role of universities and also on effectiveness of social enterprise in tackling complex socioeconomic challenges which prevent people in need from living better lives. So to start with our introduction of Dr. Lee Wainwright, he's a lecturer and researcher at the University of Leeds Business School, specializing in entrepreneurship within marginalized and constrained contexts. His restorative entrepreneurship theory, published in Journal of Business Venturing Insights, explores how entrepreneurship could serve as a transformative tool for at-risk groups and provides pathways to social integration and agency. And his current research focuses on the intersection of social class and entrepreneurship, investigating how systemic barriers and institutional frameworks shape entrepreneurial behaviors for those facing social and economic disadvantages. Welcome, Professor Wainwright.
Thank you.
Sorry. So some of the questions we hope to open today with you is, how can entrepreneurship training and education be tailored to meet the unique needs of marginalized groups, taking into account their life circumstances and challenges? How can entrepreneurship be leveraged as a rehabilitative tool for at-risk groups, help them reconstruct their identities and reintegrate into society? And what I find deeply compelling about this is that achieving this understanding would enable us to tailor entrepreneurship programs to any population or individual. So your work, I see cascading benefits across all layers and corners of society. And Dr. Robert James Cramond, our other guest today, is an associate professor of enterprise at the University of the West of Scotland and visiting professor of entrepreneurship at CBS International Business School in Germany. He is internationally published with 3 books of sole authorship, enterprise educator, consultant, editor, and speaker. He is also co-director of University of Western Scotland's Transformative Enterprise Research Group, which is a very, very exciting coalition. I wouldn't call it organization, but a very, very exciting group from the point of view of harvesting ideas and cross-pollinating success stories and support across different instances of entrepreneurship across the world. One of the books Professor Cramond has published is Advancing Entrepreneurship Education in Universities, Concepts and Practices for Teaching and Support. And another one that I just read is Entrepreneurship and Universities, Pedagogical Perspectives and Philosophies, which talks about how universities can align their program to bring entrepreneurship within reach of broader population of students, both in terms of what they study and in terms of their socioeconomic situation, and how can universities integrate themselves into the entire ecosystem and harmonize a multi-stakeholder collaboration to bring entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship within reach of more. Welcome, Dr. Cramond. Thank you for joining us. So I wanted to mention the model that Dr. Cramond has developed for universities that would help them integrate the stated mission of supporting communities and society into their activities in every aspect of their operations. It starts with aligning university activities with the stated institutional purpose, then articulating the implications in clear messaging, operationalizing the core motive of improving lives, increasing opportunities, enabling population to thrive, and harmonizing with ecosystem partners by acknowledging and transforming narratives in ways that depend on the specific medium of the stakeholder relationship. And finally, he also works on developing tools and techniques for universities that translate these lofty aspirations into reality for students and broader communities. So with Professor Cramond tonight, we will focus on the role of universities in nurturing social enterprise to a critical mass that can be transformational for the entire society, and put that path of that type of activity within reach of more people, which is hopefully one of the reasons why some of the audience members have joined us to explore how can they turn their idea into a social enterprise. So to start, which one, thank you for your patience with the long introduction. Which one of you would like to tell us more about what do we mean by social enterprise?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, if that's okay, Lee. In terms of social enterprise, I think it's that concept of people before profit. Now, of course, for businesses and organisations to sustain the business operation, of course, profit is is much desired and it's important, but it's where you can see, well, where is the redistribution or the allocation of that towards. So when we think of social enterprise, it's having that predetermined endpoint. So what's the goal? Where do we see within communities, and where do we see within certain challenges that they face? What is the key end result that they're looking to get to? And then from there, it's working back on what are the steps. So it's very much that kind of steps in the journey. So you've got that destination. What are the objectives towards that? And I think that can be quite multifaceted and nuanced, because you're looking at achieving particular goals, but because it's it's something that should be sustained for societal benefit going forward, it's how you build a legacy from that. So it's when we talk about entrepreneurship and social enterprise, it's thinking very much of who's in receipt of the operation, the activity. And because we're talking about entrepreneurial activity leading to social change or the betterment of the communities and regions, we're needing to think of, obviously, what are the skills and attributes that are important, and the entrepreneurial context that's important there. Because you can have a business which meets the demands of the public in terms of consumers. But when you think of social enterprise, there's very much this combination of, yes, it's for people, but there's an entrepreneurial context there. So it's inspiration and innovation that should instigate that sort of towards the end goal. So really, it's that idea of people over profit, but it's the entrepreneurial process which should then lead to this amplification where ideas generate fresh ideas. So it's very much that kind of exponential growth for social enterprise. It should be infectious through innovation and ideas.
Dr. Wainwright, something to add?
Love that last bit then about that. What was it? Infectious through innovation and ideas. That's really nice. I guess, yeah, just I mean, Rob gave a fantastic overview there. Maybe the only thing I'd add is that, yeah, it's that prioritization of social value, of generating social value as a priority over economic value. That becomes, on one level, it's quite straightforward. That idea that an organization is trying to develop a sense of value for a community, a group of people. In practice, and when you start kind of digging into that about who is the community to benefit from this, why do they need value to be generated, and in what way is that value generated? And on the other side of it, who is the organization and the people involved in that organization who have decided that this is a necessary or a needed service? Are these people from the community of which they're trying to serve, or are these people from outside of the community trying to come in and, sometimes bring the best intentions, sometimes a different set of intentions to what's needed from the community. So, yeah, that's the only thing that I'd kind of add, although I'm always devil's advocate when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Yes, I think that it would be wonderful to dive into the community needs that we're trying to meet with the enterprise. And I also recognize the deep importance of the point that who brings ideas to meet an unmet need matters, because it's not only that becoming a social entrepreneur becomes an option for someone to gain livelihood. Someone with relevant lived experience can tailor the discovery process and value proposition development very differently than someone who doesn't have that context. So it's also beneficial to the quality of the business and the odds of the community having their needs met. So what are the needs of local communities and regions, and which kinds of needs can be addressed by social enterprise? Also, whoever wants among you to answer that.
Well, I'll go first since Rob went first last time. I mean, it's so complex, isn't it? It's so complex because when we're talking about communities, it kind of conjures up an idea that there's this nice kind of set of problems of which maybe entrepreneurship or the social enterprise organization can come in and help to kind of work through and resolve. And in some cases, that can be true, that entrepreneurship. And if you're looking at it from a perspective of an enterprise which can work with communities in a way which can benefit from the sense of network building that entrepreneurship can bring people together, of economic independence maybe that entrepreneurship and social enterprise work can bring, then yes. However, in the real world, what more than often happens to be the case is that communities exist within context, and there's often layered reasons as to why a community might be in need of social entrepreneurial support. So I work with people who've come out of prison. These are people who often come out of prison into a context of homelessness, of bringing mental health issues, because they've been in prison. They come with quite often PTSD of the experience of being inside. And so as a community, prison leavers then kind of become a community, or not always, but can then touch upon communities of homeless communities. There might be mental health issues there and drug addiction issues. And so it quite quickly becomes a complex web. So the challenge for social enterprises is that you can't do everything for everyone. You can't provide a platitude of services that tick every single box. And I think this is where the power and the need for social enterprises to exist within a community that's connected to other organizations at different levels, at different institutional levels. That's where that is so needed and is so important.
Yeah, I think to add further there, it's like when we think of social enterprises, a lot of it will be in response to the given region or the particular challenges that they face, and that could typically be within aspects of education and health. It could be, regarding wealth and job creation, and I think that's where it's important where you have where it's local government or charitable organisations where they respond to a lot of these concerns, as Lee has mentioned about homelessness, etc. And I think that for entrepreneurialism to step in from there as well, that's where you can see that there is an adoption of either particular market trends or technology or skills. And of course, the ecosystem network, just to throw in a bit of enterprise terminology, the idea of the ecosystem, the wider stakeholder, pool of expertise. That's where with social enterprise, that adds another veil of ingenuity and innovation on it. But when we talk about the needs of local communities and regions, you'll find that where there is the intervention from local government, charities, enterprises, social enterprises or otherwise, it will be responsive to the very kind of the day-to-day aspects that you see that are political and are reliant on funding the infrastructure, such as education, health and safety. So I think when we consider social enterprises, that's where they can make that great impact, because they have the finger on the pulse of what the immediate community require. But when we think of entrepreneurialism into that aspect of social enterprise, social enterprise, creating an impact is a remedy. But the enterprise and social enterprise is where, okay, where can we make this, where can we create this added value? Where can we say this is a vehicle to not only respond, but you see social enterprises either they apply their framework or the template to other areas across a country, but also it grows arms and legs. So it's like what other aspects of that journey that someone who's in need, like what else can we see here? So other examples that I'm sure we'll touch upon later on in the hour, where we look at charities where it could be confronting homelessness, but that then leads to obviously ideas of education, employability, financial security. So that's where social enterprises can become wholesome towards lived experiences as a response to the detrimental impact that they've previously seen. So that's where enterprise goes beyond the day-to-day and looks at where can you build on that. And that's where enterprise can really be impactful, because you're bringing in other people who are maybe part of those entrepreneurial networks that can see societal issues, but look at leaner, more inclusive solutions based upon a multi-stakeholder approach.
I see. So I'm hearing a few notes here that all seem very important. One, if I'm understanding you correctly, going beyond day-to-day means that the public services are designed to tackle the immediate crisis, whether it's mental health or homelessness, or addiction. And so going beyond day-to-day means creating more space for a sustained higher quality life. So basically the social entrepreneurship goes beyond just keeping people afloat and tries to give them wings. The second note that I'm detecting is the other people, and I'm guessing this is a big part of your work, the multi-stakeholder approach, and basically expanding the world of someone regardless of their socioeconomic status or current employment status or education level or geographic location, enabling them to connect with the advice and support of a network that is as resilient and multifaceted as the networks that are currently only available at universities and in VC venture capital incubators and accelerators, and basically having such high quality network of support and resources available to anyone who is trying to mount something to address a social need, even if it may be deploying technology. So that is a second note I am getting, other than going beyond day to day into creating something more robust, more resilient, as a resource for both the entrepreneur and those he serves, or she or they. And the third note I'm getting is what you mentioned about expansion. And just to make sure I understand, you mean if such models work well or prove effective in a certain area or in a certain social problem, that they could inspire others? Is that what you meant by exponential growth?
Yep. So in terms of any social enterprise model that has worked for a given region, but it's dealing with a universal problem, ideas of stakeholder engagement, building a pool of resources and knowledge, and how you apply that within, a time like project management aspect, for example, that would rely on certain expertise that might be out with a social enterprise's remit. So that's where, by virtue of a multi-stakeholder, a multifaceted approach, that in itself leads to something that grows beyond a region to more a national level. And I think that's an aspect that you see for social enterprises. As I said at the start of the hour, that it's in response to a particular issue, and they've got a end goal in mind. But through that stages of the journey, they're tapping into, the capacity and the capability of other people. As it's societally driven, it's taken on board the skills and expertise from that as well. So when we think of social enterprise, that reaffirms this nature of entrepreneurship as for the market or society, and understanding that that's where you get information from, what are the needs of society, and then how do you respond back to that. And that's where social enterprise is obviously timely. It puts compassion and care at the forefront of that.
Okay, so just to make sure that seems very like a very important new piece of the puzzle to me, if I'm following. So the person, no matter what their status and resources are, who is launching into a social enterprise can benefit from the multi-stakeholder network at the level of advice, expertise, skills, and resources. But what you just mentioned, that network benefits in return from getting a read on what are the needs, unmet market needs. So basically the needs of different communities are understood better thanks to this. So it's very much a two-way street.
Yeah, so it's almost extending beyond. Of course, when we think of entrepreneurship, and this goes back centuries, as Lee and I could talk about for hours, this idea of creative disrupting markets, bringing in new ideas and innovations which disrupt the competition. Whereas, of course, when we look at in the last few decades where entrepreneurship theory is extended on towards more social cultural aspects, social enterprise considers, yes, you're applying a business model, but part of the unique selling point is not just how it's proposed or what is a product or service, but it's looking at the lasting societal impact. So it's simply social enterprise takes on board the essence of enterprise from a almost a techno-structural basis, but it's with people in mind as the top of its business plan, so to speak. So you see that evolution of entrepreneurship theory. And what we see now as a result is that obviously organisations are very much aware of the here and now, the intersection or intervention of technology, the more immediate engagement with consumers and society. So with that makes social enterprises more at the front of the stage, because businesses are now very much responding to consumer feedback or societal impact. So social enterprises can come now for either charitable work or volunteering, but of course sustainability aspects of larger organisations. So they'll tap into social enterprise as part of their philanthropic or CSR activity. So we talk about maybe charities and volunteering, but it extends beyond that to within wider aspects for an organisation in terms of their reach and loyalty and legacy.
I see. So it is creating new opportunities for new pathways for meaningful social impact for existing organizations such as businesses and even philanthropic foundations. Okay. So do you, either of you, have any thoughts on emphasizing personal connection over mere service provision?
Yeah, I mean, I could get on a soapbox about the kind of importance of the personal connection. I mean, it's not the be all and end all. Do you know what I mean? I certainly would not say that someone who hasn't walked in the shoes of the community of which they are trying to benefit should not be trying to offer support, social enterprise, kind of directed or otherwise. I would not say that, because that's just not, it's just not the case. But there's certainly significant benefits that come from people from within a community kind of giving back and working within the community that they're trying to benefit from. Just one small example is within the kind of prison entrepreneurship world. Time and time again, the feedback that I get from practitioners and from people who are in prison is that they really struggle. People who are in prison, who are about to leave, who, in my world, who are trying to become entrepreneurial, trying to become self-employed, what they really struggle with is the concept that you can't be what you can't see. And so if you can't see successful people who have been in prison or have come from their type of backgrounds, their type of communities, overcoming these obstacles and feeling a sense of empowerment and of regaining a sense of agency and autonomy and place within the community that they're going to be entered back into. If you can't see that, it's really hard to try and invest a sense of hope and a sense of that this is for me, because what that requires is for you to kind of see yourself in the future being able to achieve these type of things, which, if they're blocked off from you, which happens for a multitude of reasons, in the world of prisons, not many prison estates are happy about the idea of encouraging people in prison to become entrepreneurs, for instance, or to become successful business people. In the UK, prisons are punitive, rehabilitation is secondary. So we're quite happy with the idea that you've served time, off you go into the wider world, you're on your own, and that the fact that you've been in prison is enough, which is obviously, it's a load of rubbish. Because at the end of the day, who wants to live next door to us? We want the person who's been engaging with the social enterprise. They've been able to feel the sense of empowerment and that they're making pro-life choices. Or do we want the person who doesn't engage with those type of organisations, the through the gate support, and then they move in next door to us and they're kind of way down at the bottom, trying to almost go into survival mode to try and make things kind of happen. And so that sense of you can't do what you can't see, almost acting as mentors and inspirational figures. If you're from the community, then there's another dimension that you bring to being able to support people in ways which, if you're not from that community, you can't. So another kind of angle on that, and Rob, I won't go on too long, but in another research project I'm working on with social class, me and my research partner. So I'm obviously from a working class background, and I apologise for anyone who's trying to understand my accent and Rob's. Might need to get some sort of subtitles going on our chat. But we're doing a social class project where we're looking at the differences between people who come from a working class background in the UK and people from a middle class or upper class background in the UK who've engaged in entrepreneurship, and what do the different types of challenges from the place that you're from look like. And one of the considered decisions that we made in structuring the research was that I would engage with the working class people and he would engage with the middle class people because he's from a middle class background. And so there's things that my working class people will say to me that they will probably feel less, or they would feel more guarded about saying to someone from an upper middle class background who doesn't sound like me. And equally, I was speaking to my research partner about what would happen if we switched over, and I interviewed the middle class. And he said, Lee, they just wouldn't be as open and wouldn't say the same things that they say to me to you because they see him as one of them. And so they feel as though they can be a lot more candid, a lot more. And I can tell you stories about that, but it takes up too much time about what people say. And so there's power in kind of, if you're from a disadvantaged background, feeling as if the person that you're working with, that they get it, that they understand the challenges. And from that, you can start then to see this kind of, oh, well, these guys have been able to do this. So the proof is there, almost the evidence is there. So there's value that can kind of that can come from that. But as I say, caveated with, I would never say people from outside the community can't bring value to those issues because it's not the case. It's a different way to do things.
Understood.
Yeah, and I think when you consider this idea of jumping on to like an entrepreneurial process or navigating through that, and it might be whether you could be the first generation in your family through university or through entrepreneurship or in that kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem, it will be quite difficult in terms of experience, network, even down to just the terminology and understanding processes, the legal implications, understanding the process of business ownership, etc. That's where aspects that, obviously education has helped deal with those particular sort of brick walls in front of you and how to get past that. But that's where something where social enterprise is important because the shared vision is fundamental and the end goal as well is core to that. But Lee's correct in saying that when we consider entrepreneurship or we consider lived experiences, issues of class could be an aspect that or communication. There could be differences in that, and I think when we think about barriers to social enterprise and aspects of achieving that end goal, the lived experience, it's not, as Lee said, it's not the be all and end all. It's understanding what is needed for everyone in society and what are the skills that you can introduce. And I think that touches on the kind of last point that we said about that a social enterprise can't do everything. It's being able to witness and engage and see what is the core challenges within a given region. And the examples that we've seen is that where you see that, it's through engagement that brings on the trust, compassion, and enable to open up. And then that's that dialogue that then leads to the greater good. So growing the arms and legs, as I said. So that's where social enterprise can start to bring down the sort of, as I put it, the sort of capitalist connotation of entrepreneurship. It dilutes that with ideas of, okay, well, entrepreneurship has always been the idea of commercial, market-driven, profit-making, gaps in the market, how to fill it. But when you think about social enterprise, of course, it's about lived experience and responsiveness to that, and building legacies. So it's purely about ways of communicating, and that comes before aspects of class, which of course will inevitably be present. But it's where that ideas of communication over class is important, because it's something that should be a shared vision towards a shared meeting of the same goal.
Just to remind the audience that you can submit questions. We will leave a few minutes to address them. So, Professor Cremont, could you give an example from the point of view of how to spark a social change with your idea? Could you walk us through a history of someone or someones who had an idea and how they turned it into something, and what was their journey like, what obstacles they had to overcome, and how are you making the world friendlier to social enterprise in your work? You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. When you consider a well-known example in Scotland, for example, Social Bite, and starting off as a coffee shop, and one of their customers came in who at the time was experiencing homelessness and was looking at a job opening within the company, and that led to the company kind of shifting its business model, so to speak, in terms of purely from food and drink to, yes, that's their immediate service, their business in terms of footfall, but it's other initiatives that they've grown from that towards education, employability, city-wide events in terms of raising awareness and fundraising. And that's then looked at how to combat and deal with homelessness. I think that's an example where the business champion a particular issue that they've seen, where they have, obviously business has customers, but it's where you have that compassion and say, well, okay, what else can we do with that particular status in the town or the village that you can do more. And for a business model, it's a win-win, because the business, obviously, any business has that publicity, but it's through that, again, it's that shared goal. It's something that anyone across the country can say, well, of course, yep, homelessness. What can we do to eliminate that? And I think that's where we see with Social Bite, that's one example that has been hugely publicised and gained that recognition.
Thank you. So did you want to give another example, or sorry, did I interrupt? That sounded like a full arc of the history of that example.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just got informed that we actually got some juicy questions from the audience already. So while we're still in the main conversation, can we address the question of how can entrepreneurship training and education be tailored to meet the unique needs of marginalized groups? Or any other key points that Dr. Wainwright, you were hoping to convey before we dive into the questions from the audience?
So that sounds like a really interesting question, Amija. Could you repeat it back to me?
So I am just looking across all the questions that we have left, which are numerous, that we discussed beforehand. So you can take your pick on what is the most important part that you would like to address before we start addressing the questions from the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we'll probably come to this, but just on the topic of business schools and the role that business schools can play. I know Robert's very kind of across this much more than me, but I think from my experience of the role that business schools can play in, and I can see there's questions about academia, of how they can engage with either marginalized communities in a social entrepreneurial manner, or how social enterprises can engage with universities to have positive outcomes. I think universities are a really excellent place to try and book trends and to try and change mindsets, because we have a captive audience of our students who have to go through our modules, and so we've got a lot of power over what we tell them and how they're brought, how those modules are delivered. And I think maybe outside of the academic world, what isn't as kind of widely known is that as a lecturer, as an academic, you can choose to bring in whoever you want to bring in as real world people to help and kind of bring to life the things that you're teaching. And this is something that I actively do at the business school at Leeds. Um, so on one of my modules where each week I'll teach about a different perspective on entrepreneurship. One week is prison entrepreneurship, obviously. One week is about refugee entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship, informal economy, constructive entrepreneurship, the darker side of entrepreneurship. And I try within each week to bring in a person who's got lived experience of what these things are. So, for instance, refugee entrepreneurship last year, I was fortunate enough to bring in a chap who had survived the war in Syria, come to the UK as a refugee, and then developed himself as an entrepreneur and became self-employed and set up quite a quite profitable business after several barriers along the way. Um, the As much as that person allows me to have like a live case study to bring to life the kind of theories that I've been talking about, what he also really brings up, in this case it was a um, he brings a sense of realism to the students who are here, who in a year's time, going to be in the workforce. They might decide to engage in social entrepreneurship, or more than likely they're going to go into graduate level roles. And I really see it as this is the university plays a key role here in being able to affect their opinions and affect their worldviews by bringing them face to face with people who've got totally different lived experience to what they will have had coming into university, especially for university like Leeds or the Russell Group universities, where it's hard to get into them, and it almost necessitates that you've come from a more advantageous background to be able to pass the entry level requirements to get in. And as someone from a working class background, I was really aware of that. The people I am teaching, most of them do not come from where I come from, and so there's a thing that they will miss out upon by just kind of sailing through university and then out we go with a degree. And so universities have a lot of opportunity to shape people up a little bit and to bring them into contact with people who are outside of their current kind of experiences in a really powerful way. So yeah, I won't kind of go off too much on that, but this is one area where universities can, a small area where we can help to create positive change with disadvantaged communities.
Yes, and did you want to address the multi-stakeholder cooperation that you are building on your end in your work between all the stakeholders who have a role in life after prison, for example, as an area of research or a message to send out?
That's a huge thing.
Hard to condense it.
I literally hosted a panel event last night about that, and that was an hour long. So I guess to try and keep it concise, one of the challenges is when working with people who are from marginalised or disadvantaged communities, the fact that they are marginalised or disadvantaged almost inherently brings stigma, and it inherently brings a us versus them kind of mentality from the people who are seen within society as not marginalised, which is really, really tricky idea to think that there's people who consider themselves as normal, as not fitting in within the world of people who are different to others. And so, as much as this idea of there being multiple stakeholders across different levels within a society, as much as social enterprises can affect positive life change for these people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds, they really can. They are one aspect, and I think a problem within the UK is that government policy tends to work on such a macro scale that it can sometimes be hard to see real life change for the people who it impacts on day to day. And for social enterprises, they almost become the de facto problem solver. But they might be able to resolve a certain issue. So, for instance, I work with in my research, I work with people who come out of prison who have got a business idea, and then they try and keep them going. They try and keep that flame alive of developing to become a fully functioning entrepreneur. Now, that's not to say that they're trying to make them into a Bill Gates or a Richard Branson, a multimillionaire. It's not about that. It's about um, trying to create a sustainable, empowering lived experience that takes them out of the negative lived experience that they were in before prison. And speaking with practitioners, the challenges that they face in trying to keep this hope alive for people in prison are profound. Even just so, a very small anecdote is that people will engage in entrepreneurship programs in prison, develop business plans, um, try and connect with networks to try and get this going through the gate when they're released. Once they are released, they then need to engage with the job centre or DWP as part of their terms with the parole officer. There's things that they need to do to tick off to show that they are meeting agreed kind of terms to say that they are trying to create a positive life change basically. Um, and I've got anecdotes of where people come out of prison, they've got a business plan, they're engaging with a business support social enterprise. They then have to go to the job centre looking for further support to connect to the network. The job centre will say, "No, you need to get a job. What's all this? This is not for someone like you. You need to get a job." The job centre will say that because they've got targets that they need to tick off. And so that's just one kind of mini little vignette of where you've got someone from a marginalized community, a disadvantaged area, um, trying to move forward with a social enterprise. They need to engage with other institutions, and then the dream starts to get shut down. That little tiny flicker of hope is already starting to get buffeted by institutions which are meant to be there to support. So it's hugely complex to try and keep things moving forward. Not impossible, but it's just hugely complex. And I think this is where the risk of putting social enterprises on a pedestal of, oh well, it's okay because such and such CIC are there to mop this up. It's really kind of tricky because they exist within a much wider ecosystem of this other kind of thing trying to push them down. I could carry on, but maybe I've got more anecdotes for questions.
Yes, that is absolutely illustrative of the fact that this is why social change is hard, because there are so many factors pushing it back, rolling it back, despite the best intentions and efforts put in. So that's why we need the multi-stakeholder approach and multiple changes across the system so that it's harmonized. And your work in that area is fascinating. So we are getting more and more questions. So, Robert, do you have any points you keep close to your heart that you would like to share from the discussion we were envisioning before?
Yeah, I think that when you consider, and I know we were talking about academia, but also kind of wider society as well, but primarily looking at academia, you see business schools where, of course, the core aim is to develop students into work-ready graduates. So it can be quite institutional towards graduate careers, the organisation. It could be the multinational organisation or large firms, etc. You find that when we consider social enterprise and social change, from a university point of view, and colleges as well, it tends to be that institutional lead on that rather than the business school. And you will see those links that I think, especially post-COVID, cost of living crisis, you do see through research activity and knowledge transfers, partnerships, etc. These are some examples of like the vehicles upon which those that have specialisms in areas of enterprise or social regeneration through institutional-wide projects they'll engage towards social enterprises or the scaling up of business. So I think for business schools, they'll always have that primary concern of what are the key skills for work, not necessarily social enterprise. But I suppose that's where the responsibility lies with the institution in terms of how are we engaging within our community as a whole. And then, of course, ideas of academia and what we teach is then the product of that longer term. In terms of society in general, I agree with Lee that when we think of policy for enterprise or business growth or basically social and economic prosperity, it can be at a macro level. Of course, you can argue across the political spectrum that typically we've seen, compared to a Conservative government, we've seen a Labour government in the past where there has been a decentralisation and powers more to local regions. That might be something that you might see in later years in the UK, for example. But again, we do see there is obviously financial constraints and issues at a national and regional level that would impact social enterprise to some extent, definitely in terms of the mobility of these businesses and how they are able to be sustained. And again, that then reinforces how universities are important because they can become the hubs of accelerating these ideas in businesses. So I think that's where the greater idea, this concept of stakeholder engagement, it seems quite a grand term, but it's really this idea of the community aspect of universities to people that are not at university or those that have aspirations of a social enterprise or self-employment or small business. I think that the role of institutions is very important in recent years, where we might see at a local government level to the wider society issues in terms of infrastructure and opportunities. Obviously, issues of class and entrepreneurship and social and economic mobility would have probably been a bigger issue, whereas now you have greater accessibility to education, greater accessibility to support for enterprise. So we should see a widening in terms of, or a bigger gap in terms of exposure to enterprise. But of course, there are those general issues which do result in a gap in terms of between the rich and poor. But again, a remedy to that has always been education. So the entrepreneurial university can educate, but also, as I always put it, it's not educated for enterprise, it's emboldening towards them as themselves as entrepreneurs. So I think now more than ever, the idea of, as Lee pointed out, that the structure of a university as a change agent is really important because it can be quite chaotic outside of a structured university programme for enterprise or social engagement. Amidst all of the wider socioeconomic and macro level issues. And I think, as I said, we did have a general election recently. Historically, you tend to find that one party looks at decentralisation, local government through their policies. We did see other types of projects and policies in the past, in the last 10 years, in terms of regeneration in the north, etc. It's where we can see that ideas or ideals like that can be kind of kick-started again. But I suppose it remains to be seen because there's a lot of wider challenges now which impact investment in infrastructure. So again, go back to that, universities do have that important place to educate and embolden, because enterprise needs both.
Yes, I really enjoyed your paper, your research paper on the transformation of the sense of self of the students who took your entrepreneurship modules as they're going through the process in a very practical, hands-on course. They find themselves facing a situation they never did before and realizing what they're capable of, and then seeing the impact of what they have created. And a lot of people do not have an opportunity to be in such situation and gain a self-awareness of capabilities and potential to deal with the specific circumstances of an entrepreneurial situation. So emboldening definitely sounds very important, as well as expanding the worldview through real encounters with guest speakers like Dr. Wainwright was talking about. So let's jump into the questions, since the audience has been curious. The one question we have is about social enterprise founders. They form an invisible infrastructure within communities. They're often exploited and burnt out. Have you come across successful programs to mitigate for this? Thank you, Rachel, for putting it up. Up to you, who would like to go?
I don't mind kind of giving an example on that. It's a really good point, Richard, actually. And it harks back to that idea of kind of relying upon the social enterprise itself to be the kind of the cure-all, the panacea to this issue. The problem with that, as pointed out in the question, is that the founders themselves then almost feel that responsibility to take that whole problem on. You know, this is who we are, and this is our responsibility. We take on this community as our responsibility, especially when you are working with communities. You know, could be there's a community in Liverpool, an organisation in Liverpool that deal with refugees that were targeted during the recent riots, and you could see with interviews with them afterwards that this was highly personal for the owners of the social enterprise, that they knew the service users on a personal level. And so when the riots were kicking off, it wasn't a case of being able to have that kind of distance between what maybe some non-social entrepreneurs would have, the more commercial side of entrepreneurship, where I am separate to the business venture and I'm overseeing the business venture. For a lot of social entrepreneurs, you know, they are within it. It's a lived passion experience. And I think an example I would give, not to take us back to prisons, but there's an organisation called HM Pasties, and HM Pasties and HM Pasties, are an incredible organisation where they work with people in prison as they move through the gate into employment with their organisation. And they're a bakery, you know, they teach people how to engage in bakery, to create pasties, sausage rolls, baked goods, all of that side of things. Um, what I think his name's Lee, the CEO of HM Pasties, is really good at. He's got lived experience of prison, so he understands what it's like for his service users on a day-to-day basis. He understands the challenges that they're going through, and he also understands that wider kind of infrastructure that these people will be trying to engage with. And so he steps into almost that role of the mentor, um, for everyone, kind of all of his employees. But he's also very good at creating a sense of objectivity and space, um, between working with the venture and working on the venture. And I think it comes down to those, from my experience of the people I work with, it comes down to those kind of those business skills of being able to bring in that sense of objectivity and distance, where you don't detach yourself from the issue because it needs a sense of involvement and personal investment, but that you don't become the business. And it's hard. You know, it is hard, because if you're passionate about the communities that you're trying to support, then you are necessarily invested in those communities. And these are people who have, you know, sometimes awful stories. Someone on my panel last night who works with women in prisons was talking about how she's worked with women who leave prison with a tent because they don't have a house to go to. So they're just given a tent, and you are expected to make your way. And you know, her business is about trying to support women into entrepreneurship. So how on earth do you support someone who is left prison, that type of environment, all of the mental baggage that that brings? Plus, when you're working with women in prisons, there's family issues. These are people who are trying to reconnect with children most often, maybe trying to avoid violent partners at the same time. And most of the time, women are in prison because of violent men in their life. they're trying to leave and engage in entrepreneurship, and they leave without a house. They're just given a tent to try and live in. And you to try and create some sort of professional distance between that story and yourself and not take that on. How do you do that? How do you speak with those type of clients in a way which is authentic and is connected to them and is understandable? So, there is no straightforward answer, is there? I guess each social enterprise and the mission that they're trying to take on and the communities that they're trying to support are unique, and the ways in which you do that are unique. Um, but yeah, I guess it's trying to bring in a little bit of that kind of cognitive dissonance between the people and the issue that I'm trying to support. And you can't kind of do that if you put yourself continuously into their shoes. Yeah, it's not, because then, yes, you do learn to, you do lead yourself to burnout and to being exploited. And sometimes as well, Ash, you're up now, but sometimes as well, that exploitation can come from the people that you're trying to support, not out of anything deviant, but just out of, who else do we turn to? You are the person who are giving us the answers and are trying to help and help and help. So we need to kind of keep coming back. So it's challenging. It's challenging, and that's where the ecosystem and having some sort of supportive network or the partnership organizations that you can lean on that can take on the workload or aspects of it is so important. Knowing where to signpost to is so important, because you can't do it all. Even though you've got that lady who's trying to get back to her kids and she's just been given a tent. The humanistic urge is there to go, well, I can't see you sleeping on the street. We need to do something today. We need to do something now. And this is the challenge of social entrepreneurship, where if your mission is to try and engage people in self-employment, how do you do that? You've got all of these other things that need resolving first. So yeah, it's hugely, as as with all these issues, complicated.
Thank you. I realize we're passing by, surpassing the hour, but we have a couple more very good questions. So apologies to the live audience. If you don't have time right now, you can reference the recording for the end of the Q&A, but we'll keep going a few more minutes to make sure we address this. So the other question is, what are your views on the entrepreneurial spectrum between forced social enterprise and entrepreneurial social saviorism?
I can attempt to answer that question. It's I take it that the question looks at this idea of a responsive social enterprise and ideas of those that are looking at from like a philanthropic point of view, or the entrepreneurial sort of hero. And I think that's something that myself and Lee have spoken about before, about within entrepreneurial contexts. A lot of that. And Richard, thanks very much for the question. If I'm wrong with the definition there, please by all means correct me. I think that when we look at social enterprise and the concept of it being responsive to communities, I think that then puts the actual purpose and the mission at the forefront. I think that in terms of an entrepreneur that takes about a social effort, and assumes the role of either a saviour or hero. Again, it comes back to the mission and saying, well, who is involved? What is the end goal? What is being achieved, and where is it impactful? So I suppose that there is a certain element of personality in entrepreneurship, and there is a certain process which elevates people in terms of their confidence and status and prominence. So I think that either or, we can look at the spectrum of entrepreneurship, but when we think of the idea of social impact and lasting legacy, it goes beyond, I suppose, ideas of personality and the because it's through the need to respond, which is important. I think you do see it in entrepreneurship theory, predating more recent aspects of social enterprise and refugee entrepreneurship, etc., where entrepreneurship is a lot about the individual and the boldness and confidence of that. And there is a lot of personality studies which aligns to ideas of increased assertiveness, confidence, defense of their idea in markets, being persuasive, etc. But we think of social enterprise, I suppose that can only lead to, it hits a dead end essentially. Ideas of individuals within the process becomes quite redundant, because there's that saying that there's no such thing as a sole entrepreneur, and social enterprise further obviously cements that, because without being impactful, there is no enterprise. So we talk about this in our classes about you need something to be profitable and viable, and you need to have the resources to make it feasible. But if it's not desirable, then that's it. It needs to cover multiple aspects, which always ends up to the social question, the sort of, as I put it, the so what question. So what, where, and how is this going to benefit people? But of course, with entrepreneurship does come elements of personality and philanthropy. But it's the social mission which obviously is fundamental.
Dr. Wainwright, do you have something to add on this point?
No, not much. I mean, Rob really kind of elegantly put that across there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the next question is most important in my humble opinion. How can this conversation be widened and involve so-called ordinary folk, not just academia? And I think that is very much at the heart of Dr. Kremen's work, to the extent that I understand it, to put social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship skills in general within reach of people outside of academia.
I think in terms of social enterprise and impactful enterprise, and how you can adopt and adapt key skills and ingenuity and innovation, which again can originate from the university. I think that's where we need to see, especially you see within Scotland and the UK, a distinct policy intervention. Scotland, within the UK, you're seeing a lot of strides moving forward, as we like to see ourselves as the best small country on the planet, the best wee country on the planet. And I think with that, a lot of that does come from our history of inventors, innovation, deep-rooted excellence in sectors in terms of engineering, tourism, and education, etc. But when you look at advancing policy in relation to entrepreneurship at a government level and a national level, it does hark back to aspects of the ecosystem, high-tech organisations, universities. I think we need to see, well, where can we take on board this framework towards innovation and strategy, but contextualise it to the social enterprise domain, where there is sometimes two different sets of terminology, two different sets of communities in terms of that. We need to look at social enterprise as across the country and see where the existing networks and existing relationships, which primarily look at university, high-tech businesses, scaled-up businesses, where can we take that towards local government levels? So that's where there is a bit of a crossroads. When you look at entrepreneurship policy, it tends to look at a higher end of that entrepreneurial journey. It's where we can start to have a grassroots policy intervention for entrepreneurship, and that would involve local councils taking the lead, local government taking the lead.
So sounds like you're focusing a lot of your efforts on informing policy at the local and national level, governmental policy, to make the entire environment more conducive to entrepreneurship. Same question for Dr. Wainwright.
Yeah. It's I'd come up with a kind of like a different perspective to what Rob was saying there. I think one of the things that is over the past, I don't know, however long, kind of, I guess, past 15 years or so, more and more you notice that the conversation within the media, the public domain, is highly politicized, and we've certainly started in the UK to kind of have a polarized kind of set of, we're right, you're wrong. The space to be able to agreeably disagree about ideas has been reduced to almost nothing. Everyone needs to have an opinion, and you need to, put your flag in the ground and hold on to that. One of the benefits of university is that we engage in critical debate, critical discussions, disagree agreeably about things. And by doing that, you're able to kind of come to some sort of middle ground consensus, which is often where that tends to be forward. And this is an issue, the question about how can we bring this to the ordinary folk and not just in academia. It kind of speaks to the ivory towers of academia. It's all fantastic that we have these conversations amongst ourselves, but where's the spillover then in society to try and infiltrate into this us and them mentality of this kind of, it almost becomes like a polarizing discourse of the right and this is the left, and we don't have a sense of ground anymore. I think universities have a big role to play in that, because universities are not apolitical, but they're certainly less political than what the obvious kind of media portrayal of social issues are. Because in the UK, media is politicized, it's either right leaning or left leaning. And so how conversations are conveyed in the media reflect that narrative. And so we move into these kind of diapos and kind of conversations. And I think academia has a role to play in this. I think by opening up the doors more, and that can be things like not to make it about prison, but the panel event that I hosted last night was open up to local business people. And at that panel event, we had we had three practitioners. One of them was someone who was released from prison, and he was highly articulate, someone who was educated up to university level and very passionate about his lived experience of going into prison. And in the audience, we had people who were from totally different types of backgrounds who would not have picked out this guy as being the guy who's from prison. But because of that, he was able to really challenge people's mindset and ideas about what is the point of prison in the UK, what is the criminal justice system for, what do we do with people, how do we kind of put money into this, and what are the role of social enterprises in trying to help to reintegrate people back into society. And it's through conversation. So it's not politicized. He's not coming at it as a Tory this or a Labour that. It's just an honest account of his lived experience and what that looks like. And I think universities can create almost a third space to allow these conversations to take place. And I think it's through things like this where we open up the doors of what are the current research projects, what is the current discourse within research communities, how we share this out with the ordinary folk, because I'm an ordinary person as well. I am from a disadvantaged background in Liverpool, disadvantaged area, and this is my research is highly relevant towards me and the people in my community, and I see it as a really important aspect that any research that we undertake gives back to those people who take part in it. So it doesn't just become a taking into academia of people's stories, which are often very highly kind of emotionally charged and personal stories. So we have a responsibility within academia to give back and to make sure that the things that we take have meaning and purpose beyond our research papers.
Absolutely. I think it's also a challenge in action-based learning for local governments or venture arms or social philanthropy arms of businesses, is that it can become extractive or towards the people with lived experience, and it's important to engage them in a co-production relationship rather than one-sided. But this has been very, very fascinating. Thank you both. I believe we could all go on, but we are quite over time now. So I'd just like to thank you so much for the work that you do and for the direct line that your research areas that you have chosen have to to the society and unmet needs and the issues of class and marginalization. So thank you for your time and everything that you shared and everything that you do. And I thank you in the name of the audience as well.
Thanks very much.
A pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.